On July 23, 2012, Mike Klimek, the firefighter in charge of Lassen Volcanic National Park, got word that a column of smoke had been spotted somewhere in the park. About a year ago, the New York Times Magazine featured an article entitled "Into the Wildfire," and this article highlighted the many decision moments between when Klimek and his team first discovered the smoky red fur and when that fire engulfed hundreds of thousands of acres. The fire was given the name the Lassen Fire. And when Klimek and his team got to that smoking fur, there was fire on the ground, but it wasn't spreading. Now, if they had discovered that 20 years ago, they would have just put it out. Problem solved, right? Well, maybe not. We have discovered more recently the high cost of our suppress always policy when it comes to forest fires. It's a policy we've been using for the past 100 years. Forests have always had fires. As many of you know, they are part of the natural ecology of a forest. They bring about new growth. Many plants and trees will drop their seeds during a fire. A pine cone, for instance, will get hot enough that the sap will melt and release its seeds. Some plants only drop their seeds during a fire. They've so adapted to it that they now need it to propagate. These seeds fall into the fertile, soft ground of the ashes, and they easily implant in that rich soil. Now, seeds may have fallen there before, but under the shade of the thick canopy, didn't grow, didn't thrive. Now, after the fire, when the canopy has been thinned out and the ground is opened to the sun, these seeds grow and grow and grow. A forest that was once primarily trees can now become a diversified landscape full of grasses and bushes and flowers and all sorts of plants. And with this diversified vegetation comes a diversified wildlife. So often we think of fire as bringing death and destruction. But what scientists know is that it also brings life, new life. It also brings diversity and a renewed future. This morning on Pentecost, Martha so lovely shared with us the story of the first church, what we call the birthday of the church, when the Spirit came. And as the author of Acts described, the Spirit rested on each person of the crowd like a tongue of flame. It's not the first time we've heard of the Spirit described as fire. You remember that burning bush that Moses approached, that revealed to him the name of God, I am. You might remember that pillar of fire that led the Hebrew people through the wilderness to the Promised Land. You might remember in the book of Malachi that little piece about the refiner's fire that burns away all the scum and the dirt and leaves just our true shining selves. The Spirit is also known for planting seeds, as I told our kids and our kids at heart. I don't find it all that surprising that the Spirit is described this way. Like the fires in the forest, the fire of the Spirit is part of the natural ecology of our faith community. In recent years, forest fires have been getting larger and larger and larger and more frequent. You know this. You turn on the news during the dry season, and almost nightly you hear on the national news about some new fire. and you see those several-story flames that are engulfing a forest or someone's home. Some blame global warming, and certainly that has contributed. But those who study fire also recognize that the majority of the problem has actually come from that suppression policy. Fires are kind of like spring cleaning for a forest. On a relatively regular schedule, they come through and they clear out the underbrush, the kindling of a forest that helps a fire to spread. Now, prior to our suppression policy of the past 100 years, when lightning would strike and a fire would start, it would burn and it would spread until it hit a kind of a wall. Another place where a fire had been through in the last 10, 20, 30 years, where that kindling and that underbrush had already been cleared out, and it would naturally be snuffed out. But now, in the past 100 years, as we've put out fire after fire after fire, we've created basically a tinderbox, where fires that may have only spread 10,000 acres now can spread easily over 100,000 acres. As I read about forest fires this week, I began to wonder if we in the church have inadvertently had a little bit of a suppression policy when it comes to the fires of the Spirit. Like a forest fire, the fires of the Spirit ask us to periodically do a clean out and let the underbrush of our lives die out. I wonder if we understand that that's for our own protection and well-being. I wonder if we aren't like the people on the edges of the forest who want to put out every fire because it threatens life as they know it, because it gets a little too close for home, for comfort. I wonder if we respond with that same knee-jerk reaction of fear when it comes to the Spirit, and in so doing, keep the Spirit from spreading where and to whom it will. Klimek and his team, when they discovered this small, naturally occurring fire in Lassen Volcanic National Park, they assessed the risks. They looked at the models for how the fire would likely spread, and they decided to let it burn as a managed burn. They've done this with many other fires. The only problem, as the article points out, is that despite the fact that humans have been using fire for nearly 300,000 years, people have no idea how fire actually spreads. All the time, we're learning more and more about fire. We've learned, for instance, that big fires can create their own weather systems. We've learned that fires have frequency waves, like radio waves, and that those patterns of movement that seem so random when we're looking at a campfire or a candle, they're really not as random as we think. We've learned that that same U shape that you see in a candle can be seen from a satellite looking down on a forest fire. Our models for how fires spread are helpful. But like most scientific theories, they're our best guess. They only stick around as long as they are helpful, as long as they are the best explanation for what's going on. And often our models of forest fire spread in particular are pretty off base. Well, Klimek and his team, looking at the boundaries they had set up for the fire and the models of how it was going to spread, they never thought that this fire was going to spread across a Forest Service road into a stand of lodgepole pines, a very flammable tree. But it did. And then it quickly began to spread to the nearest town, which was a full 10 miles from that initial smoking red fir. Way farther than they thought the fire would ever spread. Since that first Pentecost day and the inception of the church, we've had all sorts of theories and models about how the Spirit moves. Some of these are helpful, but sometimes we're just a little bit off. Sometimes we try to carefully manage the Spirit, keep it within our parameters, and are a little surprised, as they were on Pentecost Day, when it leaps over those boundaries and spreads farther and wider than we ever thought it would. The United Church of Christ, one of our denominations, has a saying, "God is still speaking." This saying reminds me that whatever models or theories we have about God, they're always just our best guesses. They're functional theories and practical because they help us to live. But like our best science, we must always be open to new understandings of the Spirit. How might the Spirit be moving in our world that would blow all of our theories and models out of the water? The Spirit needs to move in order to bring life. Fires need to burn in order to bring new life. But as fire research scientist Jack Cohen says, to let or help nature run its course would mean tolerating greater risk. We need it, but we can't always control it. The crowd that Pentecost Day asked if those caught up by the Spirit were drunk. It's not really surprising that they asked this, right? They weren't calm, they weren't ordered, they weren't in control of themselves, they were open to the Spirit, which meant risk. Which meant giving up control, learning not to manage, but to dance with the fires of the Spirit. May we too learn how to risk. May we too learn how to dance with the Spirit and learn to welcome new life. Amen.